Hi everybody, I'm Dave Thomas, and this time I'm going to do something a little bit different. And we're going to assemble not just a rocket, but an entire launch set here. This is the Tazer made by Estes, and this is the only way that you can currently get this particular rocket is as a launch set. Now, at the time that I'm making this, we were at the beginning of the winter holiday season, and so some people may have received one of these as a gift, or maybe you're going to give one as a gift. And so this gives a little bit more instruction for those who like something visual. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this up first of all, and we'll see what's inside. Alright, so this is the launch rod, and it's in 3 pieces. Alright, here we have the pieces of the rocket, and that comes in 2 bags. It has the decals and the instructions in one bag, and then the rest of the actual rocket parts in another. Okay, and then this is all of the parts for the actual launch stand and the ignition control system. So first of all, I am going to take this part, put it back in the box, and I'm going to concentrate on the rocket first of all, and then we'll assemble the launch stand there after the rocket is built. So go ahead, take your hobby knife or scissors, and we'll just open this up, and then also open up the other package because that's got our instructions. Okay, and there are 2 sets of instructions, one for the launch pad and one for the rocket. I'm going to put the launch pad ones in the box again as well. So as with any kit, we want to make sure we have all the parts here. Alright, so we have a pre-colored body tube, nose cone, and then the base of the nose cone is in this small parts package here. This also includes the fin can and the fins, as well as a centering ring there. And the engine retainer is right there, and here's our nose cone base, so that's good. And then remaining here, we've got a 12-inch parachute and an elastic shock cord. And then the decals were in the other package there. Okay, so it looks like everything is here. I'm going to clear most of this away and we will get started. Okay, for most of the assembly in here, you're going to need some plastic model cement like this. And we always want to test fit everything before gluing, because the plastic model cement is not very forgiving. And so it's going to be really hard to pull pieces apart and put them back together and still have them fit as well. Now, one thing I do want to move ahead to here is the nose cone. Right, because it's fairly easy to assemble, and it can be drying while we're doing the rest of the rocket. Okay, this is a nicely finished nose cone, doesn't need any paint or anything, but we do need to take the base here and glue it in. So for this, go ahead and take your plastic cement and just run an even but not very thick bead around the inside there. If you get it too thick, it'll melt the plastic. And then just slide in the base, turn it back and forth a few times to seat it in the cement, and then just set that aside. Alright, so now let's go back over here and let's assemble the fin mount. Okay, and so first of all, we want to make sure that everything fits. So the fin can here is going to consist of 3 pieces, and this has an integral launch lug there. Okay, so I'm going to move that aside so we can see this here. Alright, so we're going to assemble this in 3 pieces. Alright, and everywhere, whoops, 2 of the pieces meet, that's going to form slots for the fin attachment there. Okay, so that would go there, And then this is going to go here. Alright, now by themselves, these are not going to hold together too well. So what they're doing is, this is going to get done all at once, even though they have it kind of broken apart here. So we need the two rings that are also in the bag. And this will give us something to build against. Okay, so it's kind of hard to see here, but there's a little tab right here in the slot, and that's where this little notch is going to go in the ring. And here I've zoomed in a bit so we can see this better. Okay, so this is the aft end of the fin can here with the ridged piece along there. That will become the engine retainer piece. And so the ring that doesn't have any notches in it will go back here. Alright, and then each of these pieces will fit on to those two rings. Now, again, I have not put any glue on this so far. You want to make sure you're very comfortable with how these are going together before we start gluing, because the glue pretty much has to go all at once. Alright, and then I'm going to put this last piece on, and again, the front piece here goes into the notch. There we go. And then the back goes into the other ring there. And so when it's all assembled, it should look like that. Alright, again, we've got the fin slots there all the way around. We have our integrated launch lugs, and then the engine retainer here. This is going to clip on the back, and it's a bayonet type mount, so you just push and twist. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like all together. Okay, so I am going to first of all glue those rings into one of the sections. So here I'm putting down some paper towels so that if I get excess glue here, it's not going to end up all over my work surface. And the first thing I'm going to do is just let the excess pressure come off here. And this is something I noticed when I was putting the nose cone on, is this is under a little bit of pressure. So I don't want a whole bunch oozing out. Alright, and so the instructions call for applying glue to the raised parts here. That'll go in between the fins. Okay, and you just want a little bit there. And then I am also going to put some inside the channels where the rings are going to go. Again, don't get too much. If you do, you can take a tissue or something and wipe that out. Okay, but I do know that these types of fin cans can be kind of weak, and so anything you can do to strengthen them without causing interference is a good thing to do. Alright, so now I'm going to take my slotted ring, I'm going to put that in here, and so now this piece, there we go, this piece will form the kind of the backbone here. I'm going to build against it. Okay, so now I'm going to take the next one. In this case, it has the launch lugs, and I'm going to put this on up against there. Now remember, I've already got glue on that part. And also, if you have, for doing the rings especially, if you want, you can use a brush-on type glue like this. It gives you a little bit more control. But you do have to work with it quicker too, as it tends to be a lot more volatile, and it can evaporate before you're ready to finish your work. Alright, so now the smooth side here is going to go up against the notched side of this one and onto the rings. Alright, so you probably heard it there snap into place. So it's snapped into the notch on that ring. Okay, and I'm just going to hold this here for about 30 seconds and let the glue adhere along here. Now you can see, I don't know if you can see that or not, there's a little bit of excess glue right there. And here I can carefully take a tissue and wipe that off. You want to be careful that you don't wipe across this way or it'll show up, it'll smear on the plastic. All right, if you wipe it lengthwise, you won't see it underneath the fins. So now I'm going to add some more glue, and again I'm going to use the tube type cement here on the tabs. So a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there. And you can use these two interchangeably, it's kind of a matter of preference. Okay, now on this one, put that down. On the free one now here, I am also going to glue the edges. Okay. Whoa, that's way too much glue. That's the thing I hate about tube type glues. Okay, but again, I'm going to put this on those edges. Alright, and I'm going to apply the brush on glue here in the little valleys where the rings go. Okay, and now I'm going to carefully align this so that my tabs with the glue come to go. Where'd that come from? Alright, we've got some sloppage here. We'll fix that in a minute. Okay, so we're going to put this on like that. Now, I don't know where that glue came from, but it slopped from somewhere. So here I'm just going to quickly wipe that off as much as I can. You'll see a little bit. If you don't look at that too closely, you won't notice it. Alright, so now I'm just going to hold the whole thing together here for about 60 seconds, and then when we come back we'll continue with the build. Now coming back to our instructions, you may notice here that it also indicated putting glue up on this part, and I intentionally did not do that. I'm going to do that now, and the reason I did is just because with having that many glued surfaces, it gets really hard to control everything. Okay, and you can do this with either the tube type cement or the brush on cement. And what I'm going to do is just run it along that seam from the underside on each one. Okay, and now I'm going to hold that together as well, and that should seal that seam there. And this too will take a good 60 seconds or a little bit more to make a good bond there. If you don't have plastic cement, you can use super glue, although with super glue you have the problem is if you get sloppy with it, it's a good chance you're going to glue your fingers together. Okay, super glue is even less forgiving than plastic model cement, but if it's the only thing you have on hand, it will work to some extent. I would recommend using a medium viscosity super glue so it's not running everywhere. Okay, so this is dry enough I can let go of it, I think. Oop, it moved a little bit there. Alright, but I'm going to let this fully dry for at least 20 minutes before we go on. Now that my fin can is dry, we'll come back to our instructions here. Alright, and we're going to mount the fin can into the tube. And for this, what we want to do is use the tube type cement. The brush on cement, unless you've got a high viscosity variety, just doesn't work well for this. And you want to be fairly generous at this point because you're gluing two dissimilar surfaces. So I'm going to run a bead of glue right on the inside of this, all the way around. Okay, so like that. Got a little bit on the outside that I really don't want there. Okay, and then this end here with the big shoulder on it, that's going to go in like this. Okay, and just kind of turn that around. Mine's a little bit loose in there, so I'm just going to hold this for a little bit. The alternative to using the thicker tube type plastic model glue is to use gel type super glue. And if after you've launched this you find that it's coming loose, then I would go ahead, pull it back out, and use the super glue. Okay. If the plastic glue works as it's supposed to, it's actually partially melting the plastic in there, which in turn we want to bond to the inside of the tube. So I'm just going to take off camera here and hold this in place for a few more minutes before I come back. After holding that for a few minutes, now we want to let this thoroughly dry once more. So set this aside for about 20 minutes, and then when we come back we'll put the fins on. Now that the glue has fully cured, we can go ahead and attach the fins. And so first just dry fit them. So the little tabs here are going to fit into the slots. And these should go in relatively snugly. And if they're over snug where you can't actually get them into the slots, take either some sandpaper and sand the slots a little bit here. Or if you can see where perhaps you got a blob of glue or something, you can take a hobby knife and cut that out. All right, but otherwise these should fit in without much difficulty, just like that. Okay. Once you're sure that they're going to fit in properly, go ahead and take those back off. Okay, and then according to the instructions, we're going to apply glue to the entire fin base. And again, here you can use either the tube type or brush-on type. You want it to be fairly uniform, but not so much that it's just going to ooze everywhere. And then just pop that into place. Okay, and there's not a whole lot that you can do for the glue that oozes out. In fact, if you just leave it alone, when it dries, it's going to become a lot less noticeable. But this is why you don't want to get the glue just dripping off there. Okay, and then just sight down along the tube and the fin and make sure that it's perpendicular and straight. Okay, and then give that about 5 minutes and then go on to each of the next fins, again waiting for about 5 minutes between each for the glue to set. So I'm going to do the other two fins off camera here and come back when they're finished. Once the fins are dry, go ahead and test fit the engine retainer, and this should just pop on and you can turn it to lock it into place. If you're having trouble doing that, check and make sure that we don't have any glue in these areas, or if one of your fins extends too far over. In both cases, just take a hobby knife or a little bit of sandpaper and trim that out. But this should be able to go in place and then lock there so it doesn't come out, and that's what's going to keep your motor in place. Okay, next thing we need to do is install the shock cord. And so the shock cord mount is included here on the front page of the instructions, and we're going to have to cut this out. If you don't want to ruin your instructions, you can just make a photocopy of this and then cut out the photocopy. Okay, then take the shock cord here, and what we're going to do is the shock cord is going to lay across this over the 3 and the 2, and I do mine at a little bit of an angle because this is going to fold over itself, and if you do this at an angle, when this folds up, it'll lay against the shock cord here instead of directly on top of it. Alright, so go ahead and take your white glue or your wood glue, and here you want to use a fairly heavy amount, not so much that it's running everywhere, but basically we want to saturate this with glue once it's all folded up. So use a fairly heavy bead there. All right, and then once again I'm going to put my shock cord on here at an angle in the glue. Now I'm going to fold the 1 over onto the 2. Okay, we've got lots of glue squeezing around. That's what we want. We want a nice even film of glue under each fold. And now I'm going to fold the 2 over to the 3. Okay, and go ahead and squeeze that glue in there. Basically, we don't want any air in it. We just want paper and glue. All right, and now I'm going to give this a bend so that it's curved like that. And now this is going to slide down into the body tube there. And it needs to go down at least 1.5 inches. Farther is better. So if you've got long skinny fingers, or you have the aid of someone with long skinny fingers, those are going to be the best. Okay, go ahead and apply some more glue to the side of the mount that has the shock cord visible. Okay, and go ahead and use a finger and smear that all around. Again, we don't want any air in here, and we want this to be as compact and tight as we can. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm sliding this into the tube. I'm not trying to glue it in there yet. First, I just want to get it down as far as I can. Okay, and I'm going to flip it over so that the glue side is now against the inside of the body tube. Alright, I'm going to reach that down as far as I can get it, and I'm going to hold the body tube so that I can press inside against it. And what I'm doing is making that mount as flat as possible and getting the glue to distribute itself evenly between the shock cord mount and the body tube. Okay, and then let's see if we can look down it. Not very well. Let's see if I can adjust my light a little bit. Okay, you can just barely see it down there. Okay, and you want to make sure there's nothing protruding upward. So if you've got a corner that's lifting up or there's a bubble under it, go ahead and squish those down. Because if anything is protruding on that, it could cause the parachute to get stuck and you won't have a proper ejection of the recovery system. Alright, now take the nose cone, and there are 2 ways to do this next part. Okay, so go ahead and take your parachute out along with the nose cone. Open that up. Okay, and the instructions show putting on attaching the parachute to the nose before we attach the shock cord, and that's fine. Okay. So the way they show it is you're going to open up your parachute here, alright, and then find all the shroud lines here. So if I open this up completely, alright, the shroud lines are already tied in place for us. Okay, so on Estes parachutes, they always have one shroud line that goes across from corner to corner and then 2 on the sides. So take those all and just make a loop around one finger. Okay, and then hold the parachute by its center in your other finger and just gently pull those taut. And so all of the corners there of the parachute should be coming down pretty close to each other. They should be fairly even. If they're not, you can adjust the sides here by just moving which part of the loop is going further than the other. Alright, so once you've got that as centered as much as you can, alright, come over here and keep a hold of the loops as you remove your finger. Alright, and back here in my hand I'm still holding on to that so the length of the loops don't change. Now the way the instructions show is to pass all 3 loops through the eyelet in the nose cone. Okay, and then to pass the entire parachute through those loops and pull it taut. Now the thing I don't like about this is it means you've let go of the shroud lines and you can get some slippage so that they're no longer evenly tied to each other, and this can result in spinning of the parachute. And also this is fairly permanent. Okay, and there will be times when you might want to change your chute for a smaller one, or even change your chute out for a streamer if you've got a really windy day. And so to help facilitate that, I like to use a snap swivel that allows me to exchange my parachute. So here I have a snap swivel, and you just get this from the fishing section of your local department store or sporting goods store. The size doesn't really matter except for the snap itself. So this part needs to be big enough to fit over the eyelet of your nose cone. Alright, so here I'm going to readjust my shroud lines once more. Still holding on to them. Okay. Take all 3 of your loops, pass them through the swivel side of the snap swivel, regain those loops, and I'm still holding on to it back here with my other hand so they don't move on me. Okay, now here's the tricky part. You're going to take the entire snap swivel now, pass them up through the loop, pull the loop over on itself here, and then pull this taut. And it'll form a knot right around there. And then you can recheck here and make sure that they're still reasonably straight. Okay, that one might be just a little bit longer than the others, but it's not enough that I'm going to worry about it. If it isn't straight and you want to make it straighter, then you just simply loosen the knot here and shift where those shrouds are in relation to each other. Once you have it where you want it, then take a little tiny dab of white glue or wood glue and put it right on that knot. Okay, and then just work it in and then remove the excess. And this is just going to keep that knot from slipping off and getting tangled on the snap swivel. Okay, now when I'm ready, I can simply open up the snap swivel, place that onto my nose cone, and close it. Again, this is the critical part of deciding which size snap swivel you want. Any of the snap swivels from the tiniest to the largest are going to be more than able to handle the weight of the rocket. The problem is getting a snap that's big enough that it will attach to your nose cone eyelet and still remains free without getting caught up on that. Okay, so I'm going to take that back off again. And a lot of Rocketeers like to store their rockets without the parachutes installed so they're not all crumpled up all the time. Or again, you may want to change out the chute for a streamer depending on the rocket. Now let's go ahead and attach the shock cord. If you've permanently attached your parachute, you'll have the parachute tied to here as well. But tie your shock cord in a double knot or 2 half hitches to the nose cone itself, not to the parachute. Okay, and then pull this from all directions. So pull the free end and the long end and both ends at the same time until it no longer moves. Okay, and then this free end here, cut that back to about 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch. And the reason for that is we don't want it right up next to the knot because it could pull loose. But if it goes out farther than the base here, it can get caught between the shoulder and the body tube, and that can prevent it from ejecting properly. Like with the parachute shroud lines, I'm going to put just a little bit of glue on the knot. And this is just some additional safety here to help make sure it doesn't pull loose. Okay, and then let that dry. Now that all the structural aspects of the rocket are complete, we want to put on the decals. You don't have to. This will fly perfectly well without any decals on it. These are self-adhesive, and I want to warn you here, they're very sticky. So you have to be careful when you put these on to make sure that you have them exactly where you want them. I'm going to go ahead and remove the nose cone here while I do this, because the placement of the actual Tazer decal is going to go from the edge here downward. And so just go ahead and lift these. It's best to wash your hands before doing this so that you get fewer fingerprints on them. Alright, and I'm going to, let's see, my initial thought was to run this from the edge of the fin there all the way up. Okay, and again, be very careful. Don't put a lot of pressure on this until you're sure you have it where you want it. Okay, so that's going to get it up to there. I can bring this back a bit more. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of let that fall. And it's almost where I want it. Okay, and notice there, even with a light application, I'm pulling up some of the body tube. And so this is why you want to do this as very gently as you possibly can. Alright, so if I put this, this thing keeps trying to scoot around on me while I'm trying to place it. I think that's reasonably close. I'm still not completely straight, but I'm going to go ahead and go with that, just because I don't want to tear up the body tube anymore. Alright, so once you've got it on there, then go ahead and smooth it from the middle to the ends and from the middle to the edges. Okay, so you work out any air bubbles. Okay, that's the most difficult one. So the rest of these are meant to go on the fins. Okay, so these are going to place something like that. Let's see if we can get this oriented properly. Okay, so here I'm going to line these up. According to the drawings here, this should line up with the edge of the fin. And fortunately here, if I need to move them, there's nothing for it to pick up. Okay, so that's about what it's showing on the diagram there. If you want, you can move this in closer and have more of a black border on it. Alright, but that's really up to you. You can do all the fins. I'm just going to do one fin here to kind of give it like a spin pattern would, so you can see which way it's spinning. You can also, if you have other decals, put them on here as well. I have students that do this all the time. They'll just throw away the original decals and come up with their own pattern that has nothing to do with what's on the box. Alright, for the most part, your decals are not going to determine how well your rocket flies. And so that's entirely up to your own artistic abilities and talents. I'm going to do the rest of my decals off camera here, and then we'll come back and put everything together. Alright, so my decals are done. I decided to do decals on 2 of the fins and leave an odd one out, so I still get a roll pattern from it. Alright, and now I'm going to attach my parachute using the snap swivel here. Okay, so that's the whole rocket. As far as building is concerned, this is done. And next I'm going to show how to prepare this for launch. Okay, we've got all the supplies here we need for prepping our rocket for launch. And the first thing we'll do is take some recovery wadding. And this is this stuff here. It looks like tissue paper, but it's treated with a flame retardant. And this will prevent the ejection charge of the motor from burning up the parachute or the other recovery system. And so for this size of rocket, you'll need 3 squares of this, and then just crumple them loosely like this. Okay, make sure your shock cord's out of the way there, and go ahead and just stuff that down as far as you can. And then crumple another one and do the same thing. And essentially what you're doing here is making a piston out of the flame retardant wadding. And then when the ejection charge goes off, it will push everything forward. Alright, now for your parachute, if you go search the internet, you'll find lots of different ways of folding parachutes. Alright, I like to just start out with mine here in a half, and then just keep folding it over to make a smaller and smaller triangle. So when you get to about that large, then take all your shroud lines here and gather them at about the halfway point and just loop them up into the parachute. Fold the sides over so that they cover the shrouds, and now you've got this long wedge. And then I like to fold this over once onto itself and then fold the sides again to make a nice narrow package there. Okay, and then take most of your shock cord here and just stuff it down. And then take your parachute and slide that down as well, and if necessary it'll push down a little bit into the wadding. Okay, and then just pack everything else right on top of that. And the key thing here is make sure there's nothing in between the tube and the shoulder. So if you feel a lot of resistance there, it means probably your shock cord got caught. Pull it out again and check it. Alright, so I'm going to slide that all the way in. Alright, and now I'm just going to give this a modest shake. If this comes out while you're shaking it, then add a little bit of masking tape. Start out with about half of a circumference there. Put that on the shoulder, put it back in, try again. If this is really difficult to get out, again, make sure there's nothing getting caught between the shoulder and the tube. If there isn't, and it's still difficult to come out, then just take a little sandpaper, sand around the shoulder a little bit at a time until you get a firm but still movable connection there. Okay. Next you're going to need a motor, and on the instructions here somewhere, alright, this will show you how to do it, and usually either in the instructions or on the package it will list the recommended motors. Okay, so let me check here. Yep, okay, so here it gives you a list of recommended motors, and generally I recommend using an R.E.A.R for your first flight for this size of a rocket, and that's our listed one here. This way it doesn't go too high, and if there's a problem with the rocket, it's less likely to cause a danger to others if it's only flying for a short period of time. So in this rocket we're going to open up the retainer. Right? This is the nozzle end of the rocket. This is the ejection charge end. So the ejection charge end should go forward, and just slide that in. Okay, and then this goes over it like this and locks into place, so that now the nozzle end should be right underneath your retainer. All right, now find your launch lug here. This is where the launch rod will fit. All right, we're going to put an igniter here. Now this igniter has got two conducting wires, and then at the very tip there's a little loop of nichrome wire, and this will glow red to white hot when a current is passed through it, and it's usually tipped by what's called a pyrogen here. It's just a little material that will flash into flame and help ignite the motor. Okay, now depending on when your igniter was made, this may be white, it may be black, it may be gray. Don't worry about it. As long as it's intact, it's fine. So here we're just going to gently put this in until it stops. All right, and then there will be a plug that comes with your motors, and different colors go to different motors. So the A83, all of the A8 series use this yellow plug, and that is going to fit, oops, right over your igniter here. And if you want, you can bend that igniter once it's in, and I bend mine away from the launch lug so this doesn't interfere with the rod. Okay, so once you got that, then this is going to go right on top of it, and just push that down firmly. All right, but don't just pound it in, and then separate these two wires away from each other. This rocket is now ready to go on the launch pad. Now while the fin can on the rocket is drying, we can go ahead and put the launch pad together here. There's quite a bit of tape and such around this, so you may have to take a little bit of time to get it open. Okay, so peel off the blast deflector. They do like their tape at Estes. Okay, so that's the blast deflector there. I'm going to set that aside for the moment. All right, coming back to the main package, now we just pull this open. Okay, there are 3 legs. Okay, here's the ignition control system. I'm going to set that aside for a moment. All right, and then the core of the launch pad is right here. And again, they really like their tape. Okay. This is the launch rod cap, and this is used when the launch rod's not being immediately used. Put this on top of the launch rod to help prevent people poking their eye out. Make sure you remove this though when you go to launch. Alright. This piece here is a standoff, and this simply fits into the blast deflector, and then you just turn it 90 degrees and that will lock it into place. It can be a little loose there, it's not going to hurt anything to be that way. Okay, now this shows the hub here all exploded out, but it's actually already built for us, and it has 2 holes here. Okay, so this one is for when you're using a 1/8 inch launch rod, which is used for most low power models, and that's what comes with it. But you can also put in a 3/16 inch launch rod here if you're launching bigger mid-size models or mid-power models. Okay, so each of the legs simply fits up into the hub here. And while you could glue these into place, I don't recommend it. They do friction fit really well. And so if you don't have them glued in place, you can take them apart and it takes up a lot less space. Okay, once you've got that, we're going to need the launch rod. And this is in 3 sections, which does mean it has some weak points in it. And just be aware of that. So these caps here are all one piece. You just pull these straight back. Okay, and so one of the rods has two inserts in it, here and here, and that goes in the middle. The other two rods on one end will be fused, and on the other end is hollow, so the hollow end goes over the insert. Oops, come back here. All right, and that insert's a little bit springy. This is meant to be permanent once you got those on. Okay. Now, if you're having trouble pushing this in, you can drop this on a hard surface. They suggest a concrete floor, although you don't do what I just did there. Fortunately, this is kind of padded. Drop it on the blunt end, not on the insert end there. And just do this until that gap closes. Okay, so even on my work surface here, it closed up with just a few taps. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side here. So go ahead and insert that in. Actually, that one went right on using hand strength. Okay, so this gives you a 3-foot launch rod. And now this, it's going to be hard to get this under the camera. Okay, go ahead and loosen that wing nut a little bit, and then you can insert that into the hole. All right, and this provides a swivel now, so that if you need to adjust your launch angle for wind or trees or whatever, you can do that, and then you just tighten down the wing nut again. Okay, now this is going up right through my camera mount, but you can see that there. Okay, and then our blast deflector, I have to move this. All right, so your blast deflector assembly here, you simply put that over the launch rod and let that drop all the way to the bottom there. Okay, so this can be a little wobbly there, that's fine. The same thing here. Now what this does is it gives you some room between the rocket and the blast deflector, so that when you go to hook up the igniter clips, they're not touching down here. Okay, now with the blast deflector in place, you can still go underneath here, loosen the wing nut, and change the angle if you need to there. This is the launch controller, and the instructions for it are not on this page. They're on the other page of instructions. Okay, and pretty much everything here is already assembled. So this is all looped together here. There's 15 feet of cord between the launch controller and the micro clips here. So that's in line with the R.E.A.R safety code for low power rockets. You will need to open up the back of this, and that will require a screwdriver. To open this, you'll need a number 1 Phillips screwdriver. Okay, and just unscrew these all the way out. And these are just sheet metal screws in plastic. So when we go to put this back together, be really careful that you don't strip them. I kind of wish Estes would make these with a removable battery cap there instead of having to unscrew it. Okay, so inside here we've got room for 4 AA batteries. For battery choice, I recommend fresh alkaline batteries. I've used nickel metal hydride rechargeable batteries before, but they don't quite have the same voltage. They're only rated at 1.2 volts, and so you end up with a total of only 4.8 volts in the total system, and that's just not quite enough. So use fresh alkaline batteries. The brand really doesn't matter. These are just what I had in hand. All right, so these are going to be placed in series. Alright, and before you package this up again, go ahead and put the 2 clips together. So we short the system, and then put your safety key here into the hole and push it down all the way. Alright, that light should light up. If it doesn't, there's a problem with your batteries or with the launch system itself. Okay, pull that back out, batteries are good, and you can go ahead and put the case back together here. Now again, as I said, this is metal going into plastic. Alright, and what I recommend is get your screw in there, screw it backward until you feel the screw kind of bump into place, and then go forward. And if it's binding at all, do the same thing again. If you cross thread this, you can do that about once. And after that, it's not going to hold anymore. Okay, and just put them in just until you feel it tighten. Now, in general, a brand new set of alkaline batteries will be good for about 15 to 20 launches. You may get more out of that, but if you start having problems where the igniters are simply not igniting the motor, and that happens repeatedly, it usually means you need to replace the batteries. Now, if you've got something else to put them in, like a flashlight or a toy or something like that, they're still good for that, because they'll drain about 80%. And then that's when you need to replace them for doing rocketry, but they're still good for other things, especially lower current drain types of things. All right. Also, you hear me refer to igniters. Estes now calls them starters, but they're the same thing, and in model rocketry the two are used interchangeably. These are little pieces of wire that are used to start the rocket motors electrically. And I'll show you that when we get the rocket all done and get the whole thing all put together on the launcher. Now, I'm recording this in my lab at Lyon College, and normally you would not do this type of thing indoors, but it's just easier to record it in here. So once you've got your rocket on the launch pad, okay, over here you can see where the launch rod is going up through the launch lugs there, and you now can see what this standoff is for. This keeps the rocket off the metal plate so that we don't get a short circuit in here. Alright, now when all the cables extended out and you're in a properly cleared launch area, attach the clips, and I always like to just bounce these together a few times and make sure there's no sparks there. Because if there's sparks there, that means there's a problem in the launch system and it's already energized, and as soon as you put these onto the igniter wires, that's going to launch in your face, and that's not something we want to have do. Okay, so we're going to attach these clips, and I like to attach it and then bend it over itself here. Let me see if I can make that clear in the video. So I've attached it there, and then I bend that over, and then make sure that those clips don't touch each other and that both of them don't touch the plate there. Okay, now over here, and again, don't do this indoors at home. To check continuity, you would take the safety plug here, the safety key, put that in the hole, push that down, you should get a red light. All right, now I'm not going to do anything else with this because this is not the safest position to be in. Normally you'd want to do this outside. Okay, but at this point you would check for aircraft, give a countdown, and then press both of these buttons, the safety key and the launch button, down until the rocket ignites. Or if it misfires, take the safety key back out, wait 60 seconds, and then go up to check and make sure that you didn't have a bad igniter or maybe one of the clips fell off or something like that. But always give yourself 60 seconds between a misfire and when you go up to check the rocket, because every so often you get a smoldering propellant in there that suddenly decides it's going to fully ignite. So this is the completed rocket. Hope you had fun building this. In total, it only takes about an hour and a half to do the entire rocket, even including the time to let the glue dry. So you can easily put this together in an afternoon and fly it before it gets dark. With that, have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos. Now, since I can't actually launch this for the video here, I will show you what happens to that igniter though. So I've pulled the igniter bank out of the motor here and hooked it back up to the launch system. And here I'm going to give you a 5 count just like we would at a launch, and then we'll fire this off. Alright, my safety key is in, press down, I've got continuity. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that's it.